Hello, welcome to the bee vlog, and welcome back to my messy workshop. Today I'm making a couple quilt boxes that will go on two of my hives over the winter. All a quilt box is a box that has a cloth bottom on it, and you put some wood chips or wood shavings inside it to help absorb moisture and to insulate the hive, and it basically replaces your inner cover. And I wanted my quilt box to fit underneath my standard telescoping cover. So I built in special ventilation holes here that fit underneath the lid, are not blocked by the lid, but are just protected from the rain. So the moisture doesn't get into the hive, but it's allowed to come out or escape through the vent holes. These vent holes are covered by screen, and that's to prevent any bees from climbing their way into the quilt box, because any bees that get in here may just get trapped in here and die. Most quilt box designs I've seen just take a regular box and put a canvas or burlap bottom on it, and they just staple directly onto the bottom edge, and then usually cut it flush to the edge of the box. I had a couple concerns with that. One being the winters that we have here in Oregon are very wet and rainy, and I didn't want the edge of my canvas to be exposed to the rain and allow the water to wick in to the quilt box. Also, having the canvas directly on the bottom like that, I think it violates bee space, because now this canvas is almost directly in contact with the top bars of the frames, or actually in contact. So I did one thing that's different on my design, and that is that I recessed the canvas about a quarter of an inch inside the box. So it's protected from the rain, and it gives better bee space so that any saggy canvas won't be resting directly on the bars, and the bees are less likely to chew through it. I've tested this design over the summer on two of my boxes, and it's been successful so far. The bees haven't chewed through. They have propolised it a little bit, but that's fine. So the way I made these boxes is I just made one box out of some 1x8 lumber and then cut it in half and got two pieces out of it. You can take a shallow super or even a deep or even a medium and just cut it in half, and that would probably work as well. I don't know if the handles would get in the way though. Then after painting it, I drilled some 3/4 inch holes and stapled on some screen material. Here, this is just 1/8 inch hardware cloth. You can use window screen or whatever. I had some of this on hand, so I used that. Then the way I attach the canvas is on the inside. I just use some 3/4 inch by 1/4 inch pieces of wood to work as a staple strip or a nailing strip, and I'll show you how I go through the process of stretching out the canvas and attaching it, and also giving a 1/4 inch gap on the bottom. To maintain the 1/4 inch gap under the canvas, I just use a piece of 1/4 inch plywood. I had some scrap plywood on hand that I just cut a piece out that fits inside the quilt box. You could make a shim of sorts with a regular flat piece of lumber, and even taking 1/4 inch fir strips and using those instead of a 1/4 inch piece of plywood. But this seems to work the best. It fits snugly inside here, so it's easy to get out, but it doesn't fall out when I move this around on the table. Then I take this canvas. This canvas I bought at Home Depot. It's the paint drop cloth. It doesn't have any chemicals added to it, and it's just regular old cotton polyester canvas. I cut it a little bit undersized. You want it to be a little bigger so that it has a lot of extra, so that you can stretch it easier. This being a little bit narrower than I would like makes it a little bit harder to stretch, but it's enough that I can work with it. When putting in the first nailing strip, you don't have to do any canvas stretching, but you do want to make sure that it's lined up straight before you staple it in. I'm using a pneumatic stapler with 1/2 inch staples. You can use 1/2 inch screws or nails or whatever you prefer. This is the easiest thing that I found. I've got the 1/4" plywood underneath the canvas here. So I make sure that as I'm installing this, I press down on the box here to make sure it's flush against the table. And then I press against the plywood with the nailing strip to make sure that the plywood is tight in there. Then I just staple, keeping clear of the staples so you don't staple yourself. In the corners, the canvas wants to fold up on you, so you want to make sure that you give yourself some gap in the corners when you cut these staple strips. You don't want them to be too tight in the box that you can't get them in without the canvas just bunching up on you. Then the other side adds just a little bit of trickiness because now you gotta start stretching. So the way I stretch this is get the canvas down into the corner there, then leave the staple strip about 1/2 inch to 1 inch away from the wall and give some pressure downward and pull it up in against the wall so that you're kind of pulling up the canvas with the strip. There we go. You see it stretch out here. Make sure that everything is pressed down firmly. I'm going to staple in the center here to hold that in place. Then I can take the corners and using the excess cloth here, give it a pull, leaving some slack in the bar here so it's not pressed too tight against the wall. Then I can pull the canvas and press the bar against the wall and staple that in. Watching your fingers. All the while you have to be pressing down against the plywood to make sure that it has the correct gap. Doing the same thing on the other end, pulling it tight. Stapling. You can use the staple gun to press so your fingers aren't in the way. So that gets me the two ends. And it should be pretty tight. There's still some looseness to it. It's not as tight as a drum as I would like. But with a little stretching from the sides, we can tighten that up some more. Now this is a little bit harder to stretch because now we've got the ends stapled in. But the middle can be stretched a bit. And you don't have to grab so much cloth here like we did on the end. But stretching it the same method, pull the canvas as I pull the strip into the wall. And I'm going to staple the center here. And then I can pull on the corners and staple there. Last wall and last strip. And see, this is why I like to leave the cloth a little bit wider. I don't have much to grab onto here for stretching, so I'll just do the best I can. Don't think I'm going to be able to grab much there. For added protection against sagging, I add in a little crossbar that I just staple in from the sides, and I can staple the canvas onto it from the bottom. To staple in this cross piece, I switch to 1.5 inch staples. Then to staple the canvas onto the bottom of the crossbar, I switch to a wide crown staple so that it doesn't rip through the canvas. I like to support the crossbar with another piece of wood from underneath so that it has some support as I staple it. Because my stapler doesn't recess these staples really well, I like to finish them off with a little hammer. After cutting out the excess canvas, it's finished and it's ready to just be installed on the hive, and you can put in whatever kind of wood chips or bark or debris in here that you want. I'm just using pine bedding as my fill. Use this in our hen house for our chickens. So we have a lot of this just sitting around. I'm not going to fill it too much. I want to leave these ventilation holes open. I also don't need too much in here. Maybe an inch, inch and a half at the most. The more I fill it, the more it's going to weigh down that canvas and cause it to sag. Also, the moisture won't be able to flow up through the wood shavings. So I'll just do a nice little fluffy, maybe inch or inch and a half bed of pine shavings.